Welcome to Scary Stories for a Rainy Night. These are meant to send you the heebie-jeebies as you are drifting off to sleep. It's not as weird as it sounds, but many people find that a well-timed scare is just the thing to help them relax. If you are one of them, then you have found the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe this video. It helps a lot. I'm also trying my best to keep the number of ads to a minimum so you can stay focused on the story. And I'll be live streaming again very soon when I'm recording new stories. So make sure notifications are turned on. You won't want to miss it. Now, let's begin. This is an October 2006 story. I was 19, then restless, irresponsible, and always in search of adventure. One Friday night, I ran into my friends after a late work shift at McDonald's. That's where Brandon, a friend of mine, mentioned this White's Bridge place he had heard of. He was sure it was haunted and could not resist telling me the legend that surrounded it. Of course, I was in. We all crammed into my green Ford Taurus, Brandon in the front seat, the others in the back. He navigated as I drove us onto side streets and onto long, winding dirt roads that were bordered by dense forest and seemingly infinite fields of corn. The city lights faded out. The phones lost their signals one by one. And the last thing we saw was a lit cell tower in the distance. The further we drove, the more we seemed to be gliding into another world. As the tires chewed up gravel, Brandon recited the macabre legend of the bridge. 100 and more years ago, a farmer had discovered his wife's adultery. She had had an illicit lover. Enraged past reason, he murdered both of them. Consumed by guilt, he wandered the rural landscape until he arrived at White's Bridge. Unable to tolerate what he had done, he tied a rope around the rafters and hanged himself there. Fact or fiction, we believed it all. Lastly, after what felt like an eternity, Brandon pointed to a sharp turn I would have otherwise missed. I took a sharp turn, and there it was, White's Bridge. It looked plucked from a horror movie. A weathered wooden bridge, wind-whipped and desolate, that crossed a black river in the middle of nowhere. We pulled over and got out. Right away, we noticed something. A scarecrow, tossed aside with no regard for its position at the bridge entrance. Mike, the risk-taker of our group, picked it up, lit it on fire, and spun it around like some sort of twisted torch. The hay body glowed like that, and I freaked out telling him to get rid of it in the river before he burned down the whole bridge. Thank God he listened. After the threats subsided, Brandon told us about the challenge. If you parked your vehicle in the center of the bridge, turned the engine off, and left it in neutral, the farmer's ghost would nudge your vehicle forward, nudging you off the bridge. We couldn't resist. We climbed back in, rolled over into the center, and cut the engine. Blackness closed over us. The creaking wood, the distant whoosh of the river below, and the occasional resonating footsteps were all that could be heard. And then something impossible happened. The rear driver's side door opened. A woman slid in, wedging herself next to my friends at the back of the car as if she were entitled to be there. She was around her late 20s or early 30s, I estimated, seeing long, straight black hair, pale skin, plaid shirt, and jeans. Her sudden appearance caught me short in surprise. "I saw your fire signal for me," she said coolly. "What?" I stuttered, attempting to catch up with what was happening. "Good you came by. My boyfriend's vehicle just broke down a few blocks from here. I need a way back. She pointed down a narrow spur past the bridge. Mike, ever the idiot and always looking to impress, slumped forward. Well, hey, if you need a place to stay, you're welcome at my house. Plenty to drink. I cut him off in a heartbeat. No, listen, I apologize, but I don't know you. You just pulled into my car in the middle of nowhere, a frickin' weird thing to do. I could be an axe murderer for all I know. You have to go away. Her glare pierced through the rearview mirror like a spear. But you were waving me down, she snarled. We weren't waving you down. Get out! With a disgruntled sigh, she opened the door, went outside, and vanished into the darkness without a comment. I didn't hesitate. I inserted the key, turned over the engine, and looked at my friends. My friends sat still, white with shock. I didn't utter a word, but put the car in gear and edged forward, coasting off the bridge as quietly as one might. But the problem was this: we couldn't come back the way we went in without turning around. The only spot where we could turn around was on a narrow side road, the exact road strange woman had pointed out. As my headlights illuminated the road, 3 signs leaped into the light. No trespassing. Private property. Do not enter. My stomach plummeted. The woman hadn't turned in that direction. In fact, there was no trace of her anywhere. She had just vanished. No desire to linger a second longer than that. I backed away, crossed through White's Bridge again, and started the long ride home. The automobile was silent. Nobody had the courage to break it until Mike finally broke the silence, asking if I knew anyone who was up at this hour and could sell him marijuana. Classic Mike. I returned to White's Bridge a few more times after that night, but nothing unusual ever happened again. Years afterward, though, vandals burned down the old bridge. While it was rebuilt eventually, people who visited claim it never possessed the same creepy aura. I never went out of my way to visit. Our story doesn't end here, though. Let's fast forward to the summer of 2018, when a very different disappearance rocked Michigan, this one at a music festival in Sherwood Forest. If you've ever heard of Electric Forest, you'll know it's one of the most unique festivals in the world. Every June, thousands gather in Rothbury, Michigan, to dance among towering trees, swing in hammocks strung between trunks, and lose themselves in a dreamlike wonderland. By day, it feels enchanting. By night, it transforms into something otherworldly, with dazzling lights, secret parties, and a carefully curated lineup that keeps the energy alive until dawn. For most, it's pure magic. For 29-year-old Kevin Graves, it would be the backdrop for a nightmare. Kevin, of Oakland County, Michigan, was looking forward to experiencing the festival with his girlfriend. Both enjoyed electronic music and were fed up with going to the same clubs over and over. Electric Forest offered something different, something that they would never forget. But what was to be an escape turned nasty. Within a matter of days, Kevin and his girlfriend began quarreling bitterly, loudly. Witnesses later reported that it could have been due to money problems, too much drinking, or jealousy when Kevin saw her flirting with other men. Whatever the reason, things escalated. Finally, after one fight that blew up like a bombshell, Kevin strode off the festival grounds. Folks observed him walking away, clearly distressed, possibly even in tears. He never came back. When his girlfriend returned to their campsite a few hours later, It was vacant. She wasn't concerned initially. Maybe he'd lost his way. Maybe he'd made some new buddies. Maybe he'd headed back to celebrate. So she slept. By morning, though, he wasn't around. Still, she ignored it. Not until the festival concluded and she was walking alone home did she finally call Kevin's relatives. They, in turn, called the police. The search that followed was comprehensive. Dogs, helicopters, dive teams, police scoured every square foot of Sherwood Forest. Nothing. No sign. Then the sightings began. Eyewitnesses surfaced, claiming they had spotted Kevin after the festival around motels, restaurants, even states away. Some said he may have vanished with a church group present at the festival, a sect called the Word of God, an evangelistic missionary group from Ann Arbor. But they insisted they were nowhere near the festival, and Kevin's family ensured he would never just vanish on them. And suspicion then fell to someone even more on his doorstep, his girlfriend. She first put up tearful messages on the internet, virtually as if it was a given that Kevin had passed away. But no body was ever found, and the police still treated him as missing. And even more strangely, instead of being cooperative with Kevin's family, she shut them out completely. Instead of helping out Kevin's family, his girlfriend did the opposite. She blocked them all on social media and refused to answer any further questions about that weekend or where Kevin might be. She then went on to say that their relationship had been falling apart anyway. In fact, a Reddit post was made after his disappearance, allegedly by her, that suggested that Kevin had issues with mental illness and had threatened suicide in previous breakups. Maybe she needed to escape the pain of the drugs, the booze, and the guilt that perhaps she was somehow to blame for his disappearance act. Or maybe, just maybe, she knew a whole lot more than she would ever reveal. Police tried to piece it together by questioning festival staff. None of them remembered Kevin. In particular, the festival attracts thousands, but a few admitted to nasty truths. People do get lost at Electric Forest almost every year. A festival attendee was even reported to police by one employee for raving so much that he ended up hundreds of miles away from the event in Alabama. Another admitted that overdoses and drug deaths were not uncommon. At times, people mixed the wrong things and simply stopped waking up. In one story which gave people the chills, a man reportedly died sitting up among dancers who believed he was merely passed out. Other employees admitted that I didn't want to look at him, so I looked over at the trees. But my peripheral vision stayed on him, because some part of me knew if I looked at him too long, I might catch a glimpse of something I wasn't prepared for. Just because the man was larger than me did not mean he wasn't packing. Every step past the intersection crawled under my skin. About 15 feet down, I took the risk to glance back, only to have my stomach drop. He had turned, and he was running towards me. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he's just taking a long walk. Maybe I'm being paranoid. But then, another thought clawed its way into my brain. A thought that made my blood run cold. I'd been planted on that swing set for 10 minutes since he first passed by. What if he'd stayed put? What if he was the figure I'd seen near the tree line, staring at me, waiting? The more I thought of it, the more it seemed self-evident. And that meant he might have crept up behind me at any moment. He might have done anything. He was coming along now. God, inch by inch. I gripped the knife hidden in my sleeve a bit tighter. It was nothing much, but it was all I had. I just prayed I wouldn't need to use it. If he was also carrying, I was a goner. I couldn't run. My ankle was weak from the time I sprained it, and I was halfway home. He'd catch up to me before I arrived, so I pretended to be casual. I walked nonchalantly and quickly, quick enough to keep moving, but not quick enough to look suspicious. I gazed innocently at the trees, as if I couldn't see him. Then, finally, luck provided an opening for me. Headlights materialized in the distance. A car drifted towards me, going slow and careful like drivers did on those wooded back roads. Relief swept over me when I saw it. It was Jim's dad's little white car. I tried to wave without being seen, but he must have thought I was waving to him. He drove on past. My heart dropped until I realized he had still done me the greatest good possible. He slowed as he passed. His headlamp light landed directly on the man standing behind me. The stranger was blinded for 5, maybe 6 seconds, having to retreat, putting himself onto the other side of the road. That was my chance. I didn't flee. Fleeing would have been too noisy. I sped up just a little and made the turn before he was able to adjust and see me again. My heart was thudding in my ears. The instant I arrived home, I closed the door and locked it tightly. Hiding in the forest had shown me something. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean that something isn't going to be staring at you. I should have been inside. Fear, however, won out on me. Fear that in retrospect could have saved me. I texted Jim. "Meet me outside right away. Something happened. I need to come over," she obeyed. The moment I spotted her come out outside, I ran down the driveway and didn't stop until I was at her house. I unloaded it all, shaking, panting, words spilling over each other. As I was finishing, her father walked in. He halted when he saw me, then looked over at Jim worriedly and in a hurry. His first words made me shiver more than anything else that night. "I was going to tell you to bring her over here." He had seen the man too. He said the stranger had been pretending as if he was on the phone, except that he wasn't holding anything in his hand. But that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. Jim's dad had noticed something that I hadn't. The guy wasn't by himself. Standing watch at the gated entrance to our community was another guy, dressed in nearly the same identical outfit, gazing, waiting. They weren't residing there. They weren't dating someone. They didn't fit. And it was clear that they never had any plans to be noticed by security. Had Jim's father not happened to drive by when he did, I'm not sure that I'd be here today describing this story. I never walked home from campus alone at night again. And although that memory has tormented me for years, the story that my college instructor once told me is much more terrifying. When I was a junior, I enrolled in a course in contemporary American literature with a professor I'll call Dr. H. She had a tradition. Every day, after lunch, as her students stumbled into class half asleep, she'd spin a yarn before the lecture, something to wake us up. There were some that were amusing. There were some that were surreal. But there was one that none of us ever forgot. She warned us it was long. She even smiled and said, "The devil is in the details." Back when she was a senior in college, she shared a dorm room with another girl, whom I'll call S. One night, after hours of studying, S decided she deserved a break. She told Dr. H she was heading to the local bar for a cocktail, promising she'd only be gone an hour. Then she laughed and said, "If I'm not back in 2, make sure the police find my body." A joke. At least, that's what she thought. At the bar, she ordered a martini. That's when she noticed the man sitting beside her. He smiled, tipped his glass, and said one simple word, "Hello." S explained her project idea to Chris, that she'd do an observational study, something along the lines of Milgram's infamous experiments, but not so bad. Rather than shocking people, she'd pose scenarios and see how they responded. Chris shook his head. "No, sweetheart, do a survey instead," S protested. "That questionnaires don't count. People lie all the time." But Chris smiled and came forward. "A psychology professor can have 3 years with a student and not even know that same boy killed his mother and buried her out in the backyard. People will lie right to your face. But a real sicko," he smiled. "He can't help but brag on a questionnaire. That one wants to shock you." He went on and on, citing examples of Jack the Ripper's infamous From Hell letters as proof. To S, it was clear that he had fragments and pieces of psychology information, but not genuine understanding. However, he was sincere and oddly compelling. She vowed to mention his points to her professor, and somehow, without her permission, she liked Chris. He was old, certainly, but tidy, nice to converse with, and surprisingly gentlemanly. In 45 minutes, they had talked psychology, politics, and Chris's career as a construction worker. He never made any move on her. When he offered to buy her another martini, she agreed. Her guard came down. She relaxed. She even felt flattered. That's when things started going badly. On the TV above the bar, the night news had previewed a story about a fatal car accident the morning before. S offhandedly informed her she'd heard it on the radio, a family who got into a head-on crash and were killed. Chris sneered. "I bet no one got their head cut off." He laughed. S pulled up short. For a moment, a mask appeared to have fallen from his face. Warmth was replaced by something dark, cold, unnerving. She was transfixed by curiosity. She'd studied abnormal psychology, but had never seen it so vivid an example. Chris edged nearer, associating seedy construction site mishaps with gleeful accuracy. A man's arm ripped to shreds in a cement mixer. Another splattered on rubble after a 4-story fall. Someone pierced by rebar. And the whole time, Chris laughed. S tried to keep a neutral expression, though revulsion churned in her belly. As Chris extended an invitation to his room for real drinks with a flippant voice, she suddenly remembered her promise to be back in an hour. His face altered again, flat, expressionless, uninterested. Without complaining, he shifted his focus to a blonde who just walked in. S backed off and excused herself. When she returned to her dorm, she told her roommate, Dr. H, about the man she had met. Dr. H smiled sagely and asked, "So what was he like?" S replied gently, "Interesting, but not in a positive sense." The next day, pounding on their door roused them. An RA shouted for all of them to get up. The campus was in lockdown. Pajama-clad students huddled in the hallway, crying, whispering, confused. Gossip circulated. A group of young women had been brutally attacked on campus. The killer might still be here. The police questioned all the girls at the dorm. Had they seen anyone suspicious last night? For a moment, S considered Chris, but she dismissed it. He must have been with another woman by then. She replied no to officers. Weeks later, when the news broke that the campus killer had been caught, the dorm room erupted in cheers. The room was filled with relief, but S wasn't cheering. She was white, shaking, whispering that she was going to be sick. 2 years later, over brunch, Dr. H had asked her why. S had finally cracked. Her hands shook as she gripped her glass. Tears welled in her eyes. "That evening at the bar," she half whispered, "if Chris had invited me to his room after half an hour into our conversation, I would have followed him." She broke, looking down. "I wonder if I would even be here today." For the guy she had drinks with that evening was not Chris. It was Ted Bundy. 3 years ago, I experienced my own near miss, though not nearly so foreboding as S's. It began when I befriended a man who would become my best friend, Kay. We both worked at the same restaurant, and instantly we clicked. Games, food, music, you name it. We shared it. I remember saying with a smile, "Oh, you're a gamer girl? Word. Let's go out." We were 21, 22, and one afternoon we decided to grab some food and drinks at a downtown brewery. Truffle oil seasoned crack fries, 10 out of 10, would do again. A couple beers, some awesome banter, and we headed on over to Park Circle to see what was going on downtown. Park Circle was always doing something. Swing dancing on Tuesdays, jazz on Wednesdays. And it was Wednesday, so I wondered if the jazz was still taking place. But then when we got there, it did not look anything like jazz. Instead, it looked like a church event. The church concert wasn't jazz. However, it was some type pleading this time. "John." I called in the investigators again. They dragged along their equipment, which hummed and whirred. And again, their faces turned serious. "Yes, there is still activity here," one of them told me. "But this is not the same spirit. This one is different." My stomach fell. A medium swore to it, a woman called Emily, who had lived in the house years after the first John. Her life had been one of tragedy, her child taken from her in an instant, her husband soon afterwards. Alone in this house, she had died of wasting sickness, her grief binding her to this house, and now she was summoning me. "She believes that her child is here," the medium said softly. Natalie and I stared at one another. This was no longer about a haunted house. Now, it felt like a duty to a ghost who thought I could restore to her that which she lost. Somehow, we knew we had to save Emily just as we had saved John. So our search began. We combed through archives, yellowed headlines, anything that would speak to her story. Weeks became days, but then it surfaced. A small report of a baby abandoned on a local church doorstep. The baby was adopted by a family in a nearby town. The dates matched the loss of Emily. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. We worked together with the investigators and found the boy, now a man named David, who lived in another state. He was skeptical when we informed him, but his curiosity got the best of him, and he agreed to visit the house. The moment David stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew dense, the floorboards creaked, and for an instant I could have sworn I glimpsed a dark shape at the top of the stairs. David only stayed one night there. When he left the next morning, the difference was palpable. The whispers were stilled. The cold presence disappeared. Emily had finally found peace. For the first time in years, our house was silent. Natalie and I grew to love our strange old house, and the legends chiseled into its wood. We discovered that ghost stories are not about scaring about resolution. These ghosts did not frighten us. They just needed to be heard. But the house was not finished with us. One day, while digging around in the attic, we found an old chest behind some outgrown furniture. It was dusty, its wood dry, its lock rusty. But curiosity got the better of us. Inside, carefully stored over the years, were mementos of long-departed people, photos, memorabilia, letters, even a yellowed wedding dress. And buried at the bottom of it was a diary. On the first page, it said Lillian. As I read, her life was revealed before me. A young woman of the late 19th century, full of hope, chronicling her joys and sorrows. But as the pages continued, her tone turned darker. She spoke of whispers, of being followed, of objects that moved themselves. The same things we had encountered. Her final entry chilled us to the core. She described darkness closing in on her, being trapped. And then the writing ended, mid-sentence, as if she vanished. With the help of a historian, we confirmed Lillian had lived there with her upper-middle-class family. But after that final journal entry, her life just didn't exist anymore. No death certificate, no marriage, no moving, just nothing. The researchers returned, but their gear this time picked up only faint impressions, traces of a voice fading into nothingness. Still, the medium insisted Lillian was there, frightened and lost, bound to the house as much as John and Emily. We couldn't leave her like that. At one very intense session, the temperature plummeted. My skin went prickly, and the air was so dense it seemed difficult to breathe. Then I turned, and there she stood, a woman standing in the doorway, her body transparent, her face smeared with tears. It was Lillian. She gazed at us, her face a combination of shock and relief. She slowly mouthed the words, "Thank you so much." And then she dissolved, leaving only peace behind. The house has remained quiet ever since that night. No whispers, no shadows, no unseen eyes gazing from the blackness. We now know that John, Emily, and Lillian have slept, and in bringing them peace, they have also brought us our own. As I sit down to write these words in the very same room where everything began, I am filled with humility. This house, with all its history and all its ghosts, has taught us something very profound, that love, loss, and longing do not grow weaker with time. The human spirit endures sometimes long, long after the body has departed, and sometimes it just needs someone to listen.